Hey, Guoba here. Peak Connie is out and it's been incredible, and HSR's anniversary is pretty soon. So today I want to review every single 4-star unit we currently have as of 2.0, as well as including some teams for each of them in order to help any newcomers, returning players, or even just confused veterans. Throughout the video I'll be sprinkling tips about team building and game mechanics too. By the end of this guide I hope you have an idea of how good some of these units can be, as well as which ones you want to invest into next. If you don't care about a unit, I have time-stamped units so you can skip to the next one too. So like and sub if this video helped, or if you enjoyed it, let me know below your favorite 4-star and let's begin. Let's begin with the permanent free units. Our very first free unit in Star Rail is Physical Trailblazer or Bonk MC. They may not be a 4-star, but they're kind of a 4.5 star. They are a formidable early game DPS and carried me a bunch in that early game versus physical weak content. You'll be relying a lot on breaks for survivability, and so elemental types will be just as important as in the endgame. Physical Trailblazer's damage however falls off in comparison to limited DPS and even other 4-star options. You will be able to acquire their E6 for free through the story and shops, so they're fine to invest in as an early game DPS, but shouldn't be maxed out unless you really love them. Furthermore, they can use the free 5-star Herta shop Destruction Lycone for a free-to-play wombo combo. Leveling them is also fine either way since they can change paths later in the game, meaning you will get multiple possible characters in one. Do note that they won't share talent levels, so don't level more than you want to on the specific path's Trailblazer. March 8th is our first sustaining unit, an essential part of any team comp since you cannot dodge attacks. She has single target shielding capabilities to keep your team from taking damage and further sustains your team by freezing the enemies. She will require effect hit rate, energy, speed and defense to properly keep your team safe, and these can be hard to min-max during the early game. In the endgame she also falls off versus other options due to the fact that she requires a lot of work and specific enemy conditions to succeed. She also will be eating up your skill points. One niche though that she can excel at regardless of where you are in the game's story is Simulated Universe, where she can cheese content with the Remembrance path, so leveling her up for that specific content can be worthwhile. Dan Heng is the last free unit of the Astro Express trio, and is another DPS unit. Physical Trailblazer can do blast attacks hitting up to 3 enemies, but Dan Heng's damage is purely single target as a member of the Hunt path. He will slow enemies, gain bonuses from said slows, increase his own speed, and gain a very powerful resistance penetration buff on his attacks. Thanks to his single target focus, Dan Heng can be powerful versus bosses. As a hunt unit, he can also use the free 5-star Herta shop Cone 2, Stellar C, allowing you to kit out your Dan Heng very well and early into the game. Pure single target damage is not amazing in endgame content due to the large amount of AoE encounters, so I wouldn't focus on him past the early game unless again you love his playstyle. Units like Ratio, Topaz and Zila bypass Hunt's restrictions with their kit mechanics, but Dan Heng needs E4 to do something similar. Asta is next, and she's acquired pretty early during a forced gacha pull because everyone must unfortunately gamba. She is our first buffer unit, another essential part of team compositions. Asta will buff our team through attack percent buffs and speed buffs, increasing our team's damage output and also allowing them to act more frequently throughout a fight. Speed is an important stat, so Asta is a great investment option and remains a great one even in the endgame. Thanks to her giant speed buffs you will survive easier in fights as you'll be taking way more actions than usual, and enemies are very slow in the early game since they don't have their speed multipliers at max power just yet. She scales very well on Eidolons too, so you'll only keep getting a stronger unit. Finally, she has great single target toughness damage when she does end up using her skill, allowing her to bring some form of damage for a unit that shouldn't be doing any. She's a great unit and investment for nearly everyone. Serval is a Lightning Erudition unit, our third and final DPS centric path. She will be hitting most if not all enemies and can apply a weak damage over time effect to them on top, further enabling her power and chaining even more damage every time she attacks. With her E2 on top, she becomes an energy generating beast that can spam so many abilities onto a whole field of foes. She also has the only dot extending mechanic in the game so far, meaning she can extend the duration of any shock dot effects past their normal limit. This hasn't seen its maximum potential, and one day it could be godly. The shock extension for Serval herself though enables a hybrid playstyle on her, by extending her own break shocks and allows her to just keep on doing damage from so many different sources. I think she's amazing to invest into for an early game DPS option, and in the endgame she can do great into lightning weak content, especially in pure fiction. Our beloved Herta is next, and she is acquired from Simulated Universe, and you can even get free Eidolons of her by completing later Simuni worlds. She had the glow up of the century where she went from a hard to min-max DPS in Memory of Chaos to one of the best units in the game for the secondary endgame mode, Pure Fiction. She could be leveled up early as a sub DPS for perhaps your Serval, but if you want to invest into your future, Herta is definitely a must build. Her talent will attack all enemies when even just one enemy drops below half HP, and the talent can trigger itself again if it brings another enemy below the same threshold during the spin. This allows for some insane damage scaling, and when you bring her into Pure Fiction, a mode where tens of enemies spawn over one battle, then you see why she's important. You don't even need ice weakness for her, considering any DPS can trigger her talent for her and she will spin them to ashes. Natasha is our second free sustain, and in 1.0 was so important to max out due to our limited options in healers and shielders. She can heal fine, but she inevitably fell off in power. If you don't plan on pulling a limited sustain just yet, or one's not running in the patch, then you could invest in her for now, focusing on her healing traces and avoiding any wasted resources in things like basic attacks. She also has nice cleanse utility, which is important when the bosses you'll encounter start showing off their crowd control debuffs. Qingque is our gambling gacha goblin DPS, and probably the best free DPS you can invest in outside of Doctor Ratio pre 2.2. She has some insane explosive power with her AoE attacks and massive self buffs. However, she will need team building skills, some great crit pieces, and a nice light cone as she is a hypercarry unit with no crit buffs, but once you get there she does fantastically. Qingque also does scale very well with her 4th, 5th and 6th Eidolons, but in my experience from my first ever days of Star Rail, she could do great before that. Serval may be safer and more consistent until you're properly set up, but give her a go when you're in the mid game and she will show you why she's an honorary 5-star DPS. MC is our second variant of the Trailblazer and is a weird tank hybrid bruiser DPS thingy. They will be supplying the team with consistent and interjectable yet weak shields, as well as the only guaranteed taunt in the game, aka the only way to guarantee enemies will target you and no one else. They also have high toughness damage with their easily obtainable enhanced basic attacks. Their scalings are also pretty good for a tank, and so early game they can be built as a pure shielder, but late game you can try for a break shielder for something like Pure Fiction, or a DPS if you enjoy coping like me. I will say though that I don't advise building them for a cheap sustain unit. Lynx will be a much better option. If you must though, Fire MC can solo sustain versus certain content or dual sustain with a Natasha. Again, investing into the MC is going to be fine level wise, but traces should only be maxed if you want to use their current path, as they will not swap over to future paths. Yukong is obtainable from the Luofu Memory of Chaos stages alongside tons of gemmies. She is a harmony character that buffs all units through her bowstring stacks, which will be gained on her turn with her skill and deplete on ally turns. These will give a very large attack percent buff, but can also give a giant crit rate and crit damage buff when she ults during their uptime. She requires speed tuning to work at all unless you have her E6, and even then she still prefers tuning. This requires investment and substat rolling an early game player can't and shouldn't deal with. If you can make her work late game, her buffs are massive on a burst turn for a DPS or even 2 DPS, but I'd say there are better units that are functional right out of the gate, and I say that as a constant Yukong user. I wouldn't invest into her unless you really need another harmony for a second team. Lynx is our final free 4-star, I believe outside of events obtained during the Pure Fiction quest, and she's a sustain you'll want to be maxing if you're a new player. She has great healing, great utility and works with minimal investment, only requiring that you spam HP percent on her with perhaps some speed stats. She also has some synergistic abilities for units like Blade and Clara and any future characters like them. Not much else to say about her except that she has some sustain struggles in the final floors of Memory of Chaos. I would level her up though over Natasha, Fire MC or March for your sustain. For your two teams, Lynx can solo sustain one side, Natasha and maybe a shielder for the other side. Arlan is the security chief of Herta Space Station and is a lightning main or secondary DPS. He will consume his HP and boost his own damage percent depending on missing HP. He's great because of his skill point neutrality. His skill only uses his HP to be casted, not skill points, and can even be casted at 1 HP. This means with no skill point cost at all, Arlan can pump out damage for the team. He is even able to swap to basics if the main carry needs a skill point or two. Arlan's problem is the viability of what he does and team options. Being at 1 HP and constantly losing health restricts you to using shielders, and one unlucky moment can lose you everything. It also means single target advances and speed buffs that can drain the shield duration cannot be used effectively with him, restricting team comps even more so. Whilst Arlan can be used like any other DPS, I'd say there are just way safer options to build like Serval. Now our first Nihility unit on this list is Guinaifen, the best streamer on Twitch. Naturally, she is a burn damage over time focused sub DPS, but she provides damage amping capabilities with her talent and perhaps a resolution Lycone on top. A bunch of AoE toughness damage on top of that, and you have a unit that can help out a main DPS with debuff application for requirements like the Pioneer set, but also with boosting their damage by quite a decent amount. Her vulnerability is a strict linear damage increase and will not expire, meaning fast allies again can abuse this. If you're looking to get into dot teams and don't have all the 5-star limited units, she can be an amazing investment. Even without looking at the dot archetype, she has some value as a damage dealer variant of Pela, as she can detonate her own burns and any other burns including break variants, all by herself, all at E0 on all enemies. Luka is another damage over time unit, this time physical, inflicting massive bleeds to opponents that scale on their maximum HP with a cap. Unlike Sampo and Guinaifen, Luka is single target focused. His dot and damage is high, but again constrained to a single enemy, which means in some content he can nuke the enemy, and in AoE fights he will need a lot of help or he will need to be replaced. In physical weak fights though, with low enemy count, Luka can be absolutely incredible even alone, and he can detonate bleeds all by himself at E0. But outside of that, he doesn't have a strong reason to invest into him. He has a single target vulnerability, but why not just use Guinaifen for an AoE variant? If you loved Luka, well, Sushang is kind of his crit counterpart. She summons her massive chicken friend and deletes enemies, but only one at a time, which can also be a pain. She loves when enemies have their weakness broken, gaining benefits like damage, skill points at E1, and tons of speed. This means although she can't detonate like Luka, she will go ham on enemies whilst they're broken, and she doesn't necessarily need physical weakness if a main DPS breaks for her, unlike Luka. Sushang also has a cool sword stance mechanic that allows for a bunch of additional damage rocks. You can build her full break or full crit and still see nice results. I don't think she's too safe of an investment due to a single target focus, but her ult can let her self-advance to take another turn, and she has a ton of inbuilt speed, so she's not too bad into 3 enemies. Now Sampo is a pretty controversial character, but pretty underrated too, and he is a very nice damage over time DPS. He will apply wind shear that can stack for decent damage, a damage over time vulnerability to boost him and his dot allies, and he can even detonate his wind shear and any ally wind shears starting from E4. He is a single target powerhouse thanks to his bounce skill, but his skill in combination with his AoE ultimate makes multiple enemy encounters just fine too. If you want a great dot unit to try out this archetype, Sampo is for you. Guinaifen is there otherwise though, and more consistent and universal. Pitch Dark Hook the Great is the leader of the prestigious Moles clan in Belobog and is a fire main DPS. She has high multipliers in single target but decent ones to adjacent enemies, meaning she can face different content pretty well. Much like Serval, she has a weak damage over time effect of her own in her kit and will also do a ton of extra damage to enemies afflicted with it. She doesn't even need E2 unlike Serval to start generating some serious energy, allowing for tons of ult nukes. Hook is a fantastic starter DPS and a lot of fun, but limited DPS will of course end up being better unfortunately as you progress. Hanya is our tall, gloomy Ghostbuster friend and also a Harmony unit. Hanya is a side grade to Asta, providing team-wide damage percent over attack percent in a smaller quantity but more consistently. She also provides a large speed buff, but it can scale higher than Asta's, with the caveat of being on only one ally rather than everyone and requiring tons of speed on your Hanya build. Hanya also has the power to generate skill points, meaning her buffs will come at no cost for the team, allowing the use of DPS with higher SP consumption, 2 DPS in one team, or a strong skill point consuming secondary buffer for your singular hypercarry. She's not Tingyun tier, but she's definitely an easily accessible and strong unit since she is a Harmony character, All you need if you want to scale her is speed substats, but she works fine from the get-go. Xueyi is a quantum destruction unit, and her whole shtick is about being too cool for enemy weakness, ignoring it with her ultimate and then also her talents with her Eidolons. This means she can deal some toughness damage without needing quantum weak foes at all. She does some fantastic damage, has one of the craziest trace passives in the game, will opt into a hybrid build for insane break damage on top, and does a variety of attack types to fight off any foe. Xueyi is a really fun and cool unit, and whilst her gear requirements are pretty rough, I believe through continued Echo of War runs, you'll get those break crit pieces you need on her, as no one else really uses them. She is a great DPS investment, being a top tier 4-star DPS in my experience and opinion, and having unique abilities that will carve a niche for her. Pela is next, and she is undoubtedly one of the best 4-stars in the game and is worth your time and relics. She only needs minimal investment. You'll level up her trace ideally to the max and level her talent to a good degree, but after that it's just speed, some effect hit rate, and defensive stats, and you'll have a beast of a unit. She provides defense shred that boosts your whole team's damage on all enemies, enemy buff removal if you need it, even more defense shred with resolution, also whilst being completely skill point positive. She is this way since her talent generates so much energy for her, thus allowing her to spam basics and still unleash her max potential for the team. Due to the fact that she isn't going for damage, she can go super fast too. She has fallen a bit in strength with the rise of Raw Mei in 1.6, but a 4-star unit only now losing value because a 5-star limited harmony unit just came out, just goes to show how universally strong Pela is. And again, we have 2 possible teams in the endgame. She is a must invest at any stages of the game. Misha is our newest 4-star unit and is a weird DPS that can be a secondary DPS that can be a pseudo sustain. He's a bit weird, but he has some great potential in my opinion. I just haven't seen it fully yet, so my take on Misha won't be as developed as some people's. He will generate energy and ult stacks through your team consuming skill points, all to unleash a massive bounce attack on his ultimate. This attack can freeze, reduce defense at E2, hit as many targets as RNG allows you, and all in all does a lot of damage. Combining his energy generation with his very low cost ultimate and high multipliers, and you have a pretty strong base kit. He lacks massive self buffs like Qingque, but harmony units can compensate, and I think Misha is pretty versatile. I don't think he's the safest investment early game though, and his damage from my experience still isn't big enough to warrant maxing out unless you enjoy his playstyle. But he can definitely work if you want to as a main DPS from what I've seen. Now our final unit is the best 4-star unit in the game, powerful enough to rival our 5-star harmonies due to her niche and how well she enables units. She has damage percent, a large attack buff, additional damage procs unlike any support, and most importantly, she can give allies an insane amount of energy. So not only do you get the damage amping power of a very strong harmony, you get additional multipliers to your hits to further increase your potential, and your ultimates will be cycling faster than any other scenario. Did I also mention she's very skill point positive, has a very high base speed, and cycles her own ultimate very fast on a specific build too. Tingyun should be built on any account, and her Eidolons aren't even necessary, with E6 only enabling a few fun extra things. Her stats can be hard to manage overall, but it is way worth it. You can even substitute some attack percent that will buff her skills scaling for health and defense, and that will be completely fine. So let me know again your favorite 4-star and your opinions on any of them. I love to read your thoughts. Remember, these are just my experiences and viewpoints from gameplay and my damage simulations, and it's okay to think differently. Thanks to my amazing YouTube members, thanks for watching and have a Guoba day.